Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness, our gospel says today, to be tempted by the devil. And then after 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Much of what our Lent is based on, 40 days minus the Sundays, or plus the Sundays. I want to talk with you today about this separation. How can we separate ourselves from the hurry of normal life and spend time with God? This was the practice of Jesus, and it ought to be our practice during Lent for sure, but even throughout the year. We see it here in Jesus' life, but we see it in many other places. One is Luke 5:16. It says that, "But now even more the report about him went abroad, and great crowds gathered to hear him and to be healed in their infirmities. But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray." It's in the unhurried place that our minds slow down enough to hear. Often this might feel like a desert of sound, a desert perhaps of food if you're fasting, and during Lent perhaps a desert of news if you're giving that up, a desert of social media if you're doing that. It's a place of separation or desire that our soul seeks perhaps more diligently. Psalm 63:1 says, "O God, you are my God. I earnestly seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you in a dry and weary land where there's no water." We are studying during Lent in our Lenten classes the desert fathers and mothers. They sought separation from the city in order to deepen their spirituality, back starting in the 3rd century AD. And this is the topic of our Lenten study this year. And if you haven't signed up, it's not too late. You can be a part of that even online on Wednesdays at 6:30. Just put your name by the office there, and I'll send you a link. In the 3rd century, the thousands of men and women began leaving the sophisticated metropolitan cities of like Cairo and Alexandria to pursue lives of prayer out in the desert. Deep holiness in the wilderness. And some of these remarkable men and women of faith were radically sought God in prayer. And our curriculum has this statement about them. And surprisingly, having fled the world, they began to change it. Hundreds and thousands of people began trekking out to the wilds of Egypt and Syria and Arabia, seeking counsel and prayer from these holy men and women, known simply as desert fathers and mothers. Their lives became a potent and prophetic challenge to the depravity of the contemporary society and the compromises of the church. Communities grew up around these prayer warriors, laying the foundation for Christian monasticism to come. And so I ask you, what might it look like for you, for me, for us to seek separation in order to pursue spiritual growth? We're not going to go out into the Egyptian desert, but how could we apply the same principles in our life as the desert fathers and mothers in our contemporary context? Jesus' advice on prayer in Matthew 6 is to go into your room and close the door. That's a start. It's a great start, actually. The emphasis here is of the importance of privacy, of not doing anything showy, separation from distraction and disruption. If you have that already, bless you, continue to do that. If you don't, consider maybe it's just a chair. I remember seeing my dad in the same chair every morning. I knew not to disturb him when he had his Bible in his lap. I have seen my mom and make rooms. She even has one in her room in her house now of prayer closets, but it's really a room where she would pray. We exist in a world which is incredibly fast-paced, noisy, and full of distractions. Contemporary society has seen an enormous increase in technology, of course. We have decreased our attention spans because of it. It's so hard to take this verse, "Be still and know that I'm God." Really, it's so hard to take that seriously when we have 50 apps on our phone and that ding at us constantly. Our Lenten curriculum cites a study. A professor at the University of California, Irvine, Gloria Mark, and she's been researching the human attention span for decades. And in 2004, Dr. Mark found the average attention span in her study as a kind of a benchmark of around 2.5 minutes. By 2012, this had dropped to 75 seconds. And she wrote a book that summarized a couple decades of study in 2023 that the average had settled in at 47 seconds with a median of 40 seconds. So we have lost our ability to be still, to have a thought that is concentrated, whether it's on something not of God or of God. And, you know, Dr. Mark wants to rethink how we think. And she calls it a new reality that we need to have kinetic attention. And this may be okay in work. Kinetic attention is a highly dynamic, fast-paced, frequently shifting state of focus to navigate the digital devices by rapidly switching between apps and screens. Now, some of you, thank God, you are retired and you never had to deal with that. Be grateful. But even those who are retired, you know the feeling of, you know, your grandkid texts you here, and then your pastor texts you there, and then, you know, it's just like, it's all over the place. And none of us escape the realities of technology. Well, Dr. Mark thinks that we should organize our life around this reality instead of constantly chasing the myth, I put in quotes, myth, of the unbroken flow of a train of thought. I'd like to push back on that. I think as believers, we need to begin to train ourselves to be still and know that He is God, to not be captive to the world around us and the technologies. And this time of Lent may be one of those places that we can do that. One of my favorite authors on spiritual disciplines and spirituality is Richard Foster. And he argues, he has a great book on prayer if you want to read something good. He argues that in contemporary society, our adversary, Satan, majors in three things: noise, hurry, and crowds. And if he can keep us engaged in muchness and manyness, Satan will rest satisfied. And that's why seeking out solitude, seeking out prioritizing a daily time in prayer, Bible reading, and worship is so very important that we cannot succumb to the noise of the outside world. One desert mother in Alexandria said that there are many who live in the mountains and behave as if they were in the town. But conversely, it's also possible to be solitary in one's mind while living in a crowd. One example of this solitary mind while living in a crowd is a guy named Brother Lawrence. He's not a desert father, but he's a monk in France in the 1600s, and he wasn't as educated as some of the other monks in his monastery, and so they put him in the kitchen to clean dishes because that's what his education allowed. But he has more impact because of his prayer life than most of those monks of his day. They gave him the task of washing the dishes, which he calls the time of business. And Brother Lawrence said, this time of business does not with me differ from the time of prayer. And in the noise and the clatter of my kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling for different things, I possess God in as great tranquility as if I were upon my knees at the Blessed Sacrament. I love that. I've read that quote for decades, and every time I read it, it just speaks to my heart that is what I want, that the Blessed Sacrament could be the stillness of when we're taking communion can be true in the busyness of our daily life. So how could we be solitary this week while we're going about our normal life, our busy spreadsheets, our taking care of children or grandchildren, our long, hectic commutes? Two words that Pete Craig, the primary writer of our curriculum in our Lenten study together, uses two words: devotion and beloved. Devotion and beloved. In Colossians 4, it says, devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. And then that verse and in many other verses, this word devotion means to be earnest towards, to persevere, to be constantly diligent. And it's used 10 times in the New Testament, this word, and 8 of the times it's speaking of prayer, that we would be diligent and devoted in prayer. And that's why I think perhaps Dr. Mark's finding of connected thought, kinetic thought may be okay for the workplace, you might have to do it, but I don't believe it's the best for our soul. We should be devoted, waiting on Him, for Him to speak, to find that place. I urge you to be devoted to prayer and find the space in your life to be consistent and constant. It conveys a single-mindedness, a diligent, careful perseverance, a determination. And this is the word that the early Christian writers choose time and time again to describe their approach to prayer. It's not a trivial word that Paul chooses when he says, devote yourselves. And if someone observed my week, if someone observed your week, what would they say we are devoted to? What do you always manage to fit in? What is always on your calendar no matter what has been thrown at you? Those are our devotions. And so we want to be devoted to Him. It's a soul-searching question. But the second word is beloved. When Jesus walked into the wilderness, just at the time of this walking into the wilderness, He had just been given the name spoken over Him at the baptism, beloved. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, the Father said. He speaks that over us as well as we go into the desert, that you are beloved. You are the beloved. It was for the joy set before Him that He endured the cross. You are that joy. You are His beloved. You are the relationship ordained by God since the beginning of time. And I encourage you to hear the word beloved spoken over you, knowing that as you enter the solitary place, He loves and cares for you. But here's the important thing, and I'll leave you with this. It's important to know that, like Jesus, we go into the wilderness to seek God because we are beloved, not to become beloved. We must understand that we are undeniably and deeply loved by God. And as we go into the wilderness, He will speak that truth to you time and time again, if we will make the time and the place for that solitude. Amen.